take a deep dive into U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's just concluded visit to China, its impact on the U.S.-China ties, and what it means for the world at large. Professor Swaran Singh joins us. Professor Singh teaches at the School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Singh, welcome to DD India News Hub. Now, first, straight off the bat, was Blinken's visit to China a success or not? Do you think he achieved some or all of the objectives that he had set out for himself on this visit?
Ramesh, given the level of complexities and the tenor of tensions between US and China for almost now 8 years, it's difficult to describe this visit as a success. At best, it is a mixed bag of certain new openings being made and certain contentions at least being shared in public. Both sides underlining the need to sustain communications so that they do not end up having any misperceptions, miscalculations, as was underlined, especially in the meeting between Antony Blinken and President Xi Jinping. I think the particular drivers for this revival of contacts, particularly from US side, is that in middle of now presidential elections, US sees that they perhaps need China's support in putting certain restraint on Russia, because China is a major support base for Russia in terms of supplies. And of course, also more recently, putting certain restraint through Beijing on Iran, if possible, so that the Middle East doesn't really get out of control. So these are immediate, I think, triggers which made Antony Blinken make its second visit. At least these issues was shared, and some other issues where US has traditionally had contentions with China were also shared. So it's a mixed bag, I think, but it's a good news that their interactions are being revived now rather than both sides really avoiding each other.
Fair enough. Mixed bag, says Professor Singh. Professor Singh, you referred to the contentious issues in US-China ties, so I have to ask you a follow-up question. Now, Blinken's visit produced little progress on contentious issues such as tensions over Taiwan and the South China Sea. So, if differences persist, how might that affect the region, India included?
I think definitely India is keeping a very close eye on what kind of rapprochement or what kind of interactions are happening between US and China. Because both United States and China are very important for India's foreign policy, India's whole transformation of relationship with the United States, India's continuing border tensions with China, make it significant to see whether they're coming closer in any of the issues could shrink India's leverages in dealing with both of these number one and number two economies, particularly when India is growing as the third largest economy in the making. So India definitely has a very keen eye on what is happening there. And we saw in the end, and it is a usual thing for US, high-level visits, that in the end, the last interaction is usually a news conference where they, openly speak about their contentions. And the same thing was underlined that ironclad support to Manila, the issues of human rights in Taiwan, issues of Tibet, and all kinds of other contentious issues were underlined in the end of the meeting, end of the visit. But particularly the meeting with Xi Jinping had all the pleasantries, though it began with the meeting with Wang Yi, where Wang Yi was fairly tough in terms of talking to the United States. So it's a whole settled pattern of where you begin talking tough and go and in the end talk about your contentions,
right,
so that you can go home saying that I did put my point across.
Mm-hmm. Now, we spoke about the Indo-Pacific, Professor Singh. Let me also now ask you for your opinion on Russia, since you referred to it in your opening remarks. Now, it's been reported by the Western media at least that Blinken voiced his concern about China's support to Russia's military. But some would say that the US has itself to blame for pushing Russia into a tighter embrace with China. How do you look at it?
I think there is absolutely no doubt that the whole effort in isolating Russia, as President Biden said, had brought together a coalition of 50 countries, did make Russia far more dependent on China or increase China's leverages vis-a-vis President Putin. But this whole contention of United States of China providing material support to the military prowess of Russia is perhaps little far-fetched, needs to be
Okay.
established as to how materially China is supporting Russian military.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, economically, China is the biggest trading partner, buyer of energy from Russia. So in that sense, I think that if United States has to be any more effective in cutting down on Russia's capabilities, China is the key in that sense. And I don't think China will easily make any concessions to United States on
Okay.
that turf.
Let's talk a bit, if you will, Professor Singh, about the political economy. How do you think trade talks between the world's top two economies will affect the rest of the world? Now, already we are told that not much headway was made on the issue of the US complaints about, for instance, cheap Chinese exports. Also, Blinken's visit to China coincided with Biden signing a bill to ban TikTok in the US.
I think it's a story that goes back to decades. First, vis-a-vis U.S. concerns about rise of Japan as a big economy. More recently, in the last couple of decades, U.S. concerns about rise of Chinese economy, and the whole effort of ensuring that China doesn't really become even stronger compared to United States. And more recently, other than the trade and the tariff wars, we have seen whole clamping down on advanced technologies, particularly chips, semiconductors regulations. Last year saw a very unusual sort of effort on United States to not just deny their own citizens, but deny even the aliens or any residents living in the United States to have anything to do with China when it comes to semiconductors, and a whole list of Chinese companies being blacklisted. So this is an effort to make sure China doesn't outgrow in that sense, in terms of global leadership, at least to begin with economic prowess. And one after another, American documents have put it on record that they now believe that at least in Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific, Chinese not only have intentions, but today have capability to replace United States, and that's a serious concern for them. But I seriously believe that all these efforts to, sort of have a sledgehammer approach to deny advanced technologies to China will only delay China's rise by maybe 4 to 5 years. Ultimately, they will find other routes or other ways of overcoming these limitations. And China is a big economy today, and I think more balanced relationship between the two is how I expect it should grow. And China is definitely wanted to grow in terms of more partnership and least damaging to each other in that sense. That is again something that President Xi Jinping underlined in his discussion today, that they should make sure that they do not turn into adversaries of each other in coming times.
True. And finally, Professor Singh, do you think India would be watching these developments very, very closely? What's in it for India, really?
I think so many times it has happened in history that whenever US and China came rather close, and I remember long back when India had tested nuclear weapons and President Clinton had visited Beijing, and there was this whole joint statement of saying that they will together work to manage stability and peace in South Asia. Similarly,
there was talk of G2 as well, Professor Singh.
Yeah, indeed, Ramesh. And reverse is also true. When President Obama came and joint statement said that India and the United States will work together to ensure stability in South China Sea.
Right.
So fundamentally, when US comes closer to India, Chinese get very worried, and obviously India keeps an eye if United States is anywhere going closer to Beijing. So in that sense, right now, I think repeatedly everyone is saying, after the November last year visit to San Francisco and meeting of two national leaders, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden, relations are at least stabilized, but there are enormous contentions and tensions, and India doesn't have to worry much about China having any leverages over India's very close relationship with the United States.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Professor Singh, thank you once again for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.